Hi, can everyone hear me? My name is Jana Ireijo. I have the honor of moderating this panel today, and just to briefly introduce myself, I'm an artist that paints murals that are meant to vanish. I use charcoal from wildfires mixed with ocean water and stream water, and they're meant to spark conversations about climate change, conservation, community, and culture. And recently, I translated this idea into a vanishing NFT. It's a climate-responsive digital artwork that shifts with real-time ocean data, which is tied to the blockchain. And this was developed with Ellen and a few other innovators who are in the room today. And I'm moderating this panel, and I'm really excited to hear their voices today. And to start it off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves and your work?
Hello. Aloha mai kākou, Richard Koinoa. Richard Ng. I was born and raised on the island of Oahu. I currently live in Oakland, California. I'm the program manager for IndigiDAO. It's a program based in the nonprofit New Mexico Community Capital out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. We're like probably around a year and a half old, and we work with Indigenous entrepreneurs. The reason why we picked a DAO and exploring blockchain and emerging technologies was to see if we could create new structures for community governance and community ownership, especially for entrepreneurs as well too. And then with that film, that's another group I'm with called Ho'okohua'ike, and we look at cultural representation and emerging technologies and media. We'll talk more about that later too. So mahalo everyone.
Aloha, Velina mai kākou. Alana Kanahele ku'i noa no wailua Oahu mai au. Akanohoa mai kamiki I keia manawa. Mahalo nui ka hui ana I, keia hale hui ike. It's, what else do I want to say? Introducing myself in Hawaiian first, just, since this is an Indigenous sovereignty panel. O ana hulu me ka konahua, ku'u na vai. O hui hui ka ula I ku'u ua. So the waters that I grew up around, we tend to introduce ourselves. So I grew up in Waialua, Oahu on the North Shore, so the Kaukonahua River and the Anahulu River, Kahuihui Ula Rain, and I work in Indigenous data sovereignty, algorithmic data sovereignty, particularly with smart contracts with different communities in the Pacific. I'm also the Director of Research and Cultural Training at Waimea Valley on the North Shore.
Aloha everyone, it's a great blessing to be here. And I'm Edwin, Lia'va from Tonga. I'm the founder of the Web3 Tech Hub. A little bit of context about myself. I'm currently the chairman of the board of directors for the Tonga Cable Limited, which is a custodian for the submarine fiber optic network for Tonga, whereby I was CEO from 2018 to 2020. In addition to that, I was also a corporate director for Pacific Satellite Broadband, based in Singapore, serving the Pacific region. And I've been in several roles across the Pacific, building solutions for Melanesia, Polynesia, and Micronesia. And now that's a little bit of a concept about my journey, which brings me to today. And I admire the keynote speaker, Kei Hokalole's speech this morning, and I stand by that too. We're here to fail until we succeed. And that's basically like how I got into this space that I have shared with some of the colleagues today. I just got tired of false promises, and which pretty much some people relate to as paper promises. And there's pretty much some of us are in this space because we would rather trust on cryptography and what is proven by mathematics rather than just the proof of just a word of mouth. And from a cultural point of perspective, what is sovereignty to you? If we strip off everything that we have to our bare bones, like some people will ask me, or which I relate to as one of our founders and King Teboho IV, he was on a he was interviewed, I think it was Radio Australia back in the 90s or the 80s, and they asked him, what is Tonga? As we understand it, it's more like a constitutional monarchy. And he shared with them, no, we are a democracy. And then they said, in one sense, he said, it's a higher form of democracy. Because in our own context, sovereignty to us is based on our land. That's where we stand. And it's a higher form of democracy because everything and every decision we make is community-driven. Grounds up to the top level. I want to end with this. I have been approached by a lot of people to run for parliament. The next Tonga parliament election is in November. But I have postponed it to 2028 because I want to build first. I want to build, I want to build, because at the end of the day, we can build everything, but it is empowered by legislation. Legislature is done by the politicians. And if you're in this space, if you want to push that envelope further, you have to get into politics one way or the other. Thank you.
I'd like to continue with that question and pose the question to Alana and Richard. When you hear the word sovereignty in the context of blockchain, what does it mean for the communities you work for?
Yeah, I think oftentimes we think about blockchain in terms of controlling technologies, and I think when it comes to the Pacific and Oceania and Pasifika communities, it's really much more about sort of upholding our Indigenous cultural values and just sort of looking into the broader Pacific about self-determination, about ea, as kind of the Hawaiian word for sovereignty, as sort of a loose definition, and really the right to govern our aina, our vai, our moana, our oceans, and I think within blockchain it's really more about securing that these cultural protocols and these rights are embedded into what we're trying to produce. And so for me, I work a lot with smart contracts and trying to keep these cultural protocols embedded into within technology and for these Pacific Island communities. And so this idea of really collective stewardship and protocols that are rooted in consent and connecting all of our communities across Oceania, I think is a big part of what comes to mind when I think of sovereignty and of ea, particularly here in Hawaii and Oceania more generally.
Yeah, definitely. I think just to add on to the conversation, when talking about sovereignty, we primarily work with Indigenous entrepreneurs and Indigenous knowledge holders. So entrepreneurs in the broad scope, artists, land stewards, artisans, researchers as well too. So sovereignty, I think, going along with what Alana said, a lot of it is around the self-determination and being able to govern yourselves. That's when we think about, especially in Hawaii as well too, like ea, like Alana was saying. For blockchain sovereignty, it's really along the lines of digital data sovereignty as well too. So how do you govern your digital self, and for communities as well too, how they're represented digitally. For our DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization, a lot of it was, could we create new structures that economically empowered Indigenous entrepreneurs? So there's economic sovereignty as well too, and then using blockchain as well for the data sovereignty part, which was really important. Also for our DAO, I think what was interesting, because we've only been around for a year, so we've done a lot of community engagement. We really embraced a lot of the philosophical side on the DAO. So we have two philosophies that we really follow. One is the Tao Te Ching, and I actually have my book of right here, the Tao Te Ching. I carry it everywhere. So Lao Tzu, the way. So the community having the ability to create a vision and using infrastructure to create whatever they need, right? Tools, protocols, roles, and ceremonies. And then we use another philosophy from one of our elders in New Mexico, Dr. Greg Kahete, called Look to the Mountain. It's a visionary practice that has 7 stages, and at the core of it is the vision. So what blockchain enables is the ability for communities to vision and have their own sovereignty to, again, create whatever they need in real time. I think that is sovereignty as well too. That's like true sovereignty, right? So outside of the technology, I think what we're looking at is how do we adopt these tools so communities can just create for what they need.
Thank you. Full disclosure, I'm really good friends with Alana, so I'm really excited to hear more about her work. So my question to you is, how can blockchain safeguard oral histories, genealogies, and cultural records so that they remain authentic, untampered, and owned by the community?
Yeah, so one of the other things I forgot to mention is I also work at the Center for Oral History at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So, you know, in terms of talking about oral histories and genealogies and, you know, what that might look like and what that has looked like a little bit on blockchain. You know, I mean, I think a lot of us know that, you know, one of the features of blockchain, right, is it's this unchangeable ledger. If anything wants to be altered or changed or, you know, it can't be done without leaving a trace. And so in a lot of ways that really sort of preserves kind of the integrity of our stories and our genealogies against tampering. So I mean, I think that's, you know, that's maybe one way to frame it. You know, it does allow for, you know, kind of this encoding of cultural and community protocols. Before I was working with blockchain, I was working with Mukutu, which is a type of content management system, and I was running the Hawaii, Pacific, and Alaska hub, and so we were working with different indigenous communities to digitize some of their cultural heritage and creating websites that were, you know, based around, if they were putting up a collection, if it was, you know, based around access around seasons or gender or rituals or clans or families or tribes or whatever it was, you know, just being able to now kind of implement that onto blockchain is sort of been the field that I've kind of been working in the last couple of years. And yeah, so I think that's another way. But again, you know, community ownership and, you know, verification. And so, you know, it's, you know, things can't be extracted or commercialized without consent. And so I think that's another really important aspect when it comes to digital cultural preservation.
To go back to your film, Richard, I thought it was such a beautiful and powerful way to have so many layered messages through storytelling. What is the takeaway you would like the audience to take from this film? Yeah,
so the film is speculative fiction, right? But it's based off of the mo'olelo of Poliahu and Pele. So if you know, there was a sledding contest, and Poliahu is like the goddess of snow, she created snow on Mauna Kea, and Pele is the goddess of fire. They had a contest, and they ended up fighting. What this does, it reinterprets that mo'olelo, and Poliahu is the main character, and she has that blue thing that's carried, we call it the peva, and essentially in that year 2112, say all Kanaka are being exiled for some reason, but she has this peva that holds all this knowledge, and she has to merge it with Pele's firewall. That's what that was. But that peva really is a blockchain data trust right now, right? So this technology that exists, and what Alana's talking about, like this is what we need to start thinking about. How do communities, how do they help develop this technology? And how are they involved in this process? I think what we learned through the DAO, and our DAO, and talking with indigenous entrepreneurs is, it's a big thing for them to understand what their role in is this creation of this technology. So through the film, we're trying to show through Gen AI that there is cultural misrepresentation. If culture and community is not involved right now, what could happen is you're going to get misrepresentation. We purposefully used Sora, which is OpenAI's Gen video model, to show there's inaccuracies, right? We said it in the future because we can't accurately represent modern culture. So the messages in her are like, again, if the community is part of this conversation, we use technology like blockchain to create these structures where communities can govern themselves, govern their data, have their own sovereignty if they want to participate in large language models, enterprise models. We're really trying to enter the conversation of enterprise commoditization of culture for data assets. Like that is the big thing. So I think everything Alana's talking about, everything Edwin's talking about, like we're at this conversation right now where community has to be a big part of it. And that's kind of like that film. There's a lot of like inceptions in it as well. So that's what we kind of wanted to show with that film.
Edwin, what does digitizing cultural heritage look like for Tonga, and how do we respect protocols for sacred and sensitive knowledge?
Thank you. In a nutshell, there has to be founding infrastructure, whether by its databases, and this has been done for quite some time. And also in our oratory and our traditions and our myths and legends, I think we are gradually transitioning, and I think we would all agree, we are living in the future right now. And the way I see it, it is more like the guiding principles that we have on Pasifika Way Free Tech Hub. If we take care of our own, they will take care of us. It's more like based on reciprocity. That's pretty much the building blocks of Pacific Island lifestyle and how we have been brought up for generations. And we offer, the Tech Hub is more like a resource hub whereby we provide education for providing awareness and capacity building, because adoption of this technology in our side of the Pacific is very primitive. We also provide e-governance solutions using private blockchains, and we also provide asset management tool based on decentralized physical infrastructure for utilities, water, telecom, and power, which brings us back to our oral traditions and our customs. Like I mentioned earlier, what is sovereign to you, to a Pacific Islander? For us, it's our land, but we are running out of land. I will add on to that, and this is I learned from my father. Your best resource is what you have in your brain. So that's, for me, that's real wealth, which is knowledge that is portable, which brings us to blockchains and why we're here today. Wealth and knowledge needs to be portable, and these go hand in hand. So, thank you.
How do we make sure these economic tools don't just replicate extractive systems that have harmed Indigenous peoples in the past?
Wait, I'm sorry, what was the question?
How do we make sure these economic tools don't just replicate extractive systems that have harmed Indigenous peoples in the past?
Yeah, I think, and that was one of the reasons why I think for our community, we picked the DAO structure because of the community governance component of it. I think, if enterprise they say it's going to extract, right? It's purely extractive, whereas what blockchain can do, again, is decentralize, right? So we're really looking, again, on the governance side of this. Shared economy, shared resources. Again, I think a big thing for us, what we really try to promote is the kinship economy. So what we try to do on the continent is we work with different indigenous communities and recreate ancestral trading routes. That is purely based off of kinship and reciprocity. I think, again, these technologies have to be infused with these values. So these are just tools, right? When you're doing community building, you have to really have a vision for what that looks like. So if the community wants to have their own sustainable economies, there are tools for that, right? There are sovereign economies that can be built, even with tokens as well. These are new currencies that communities can develop to have their own sustainability, but you have to have the vision and you have to have values first. So what blockchain is great about, again, is the decentralized component. We're big on community governance and big on community ownership. That was so appealing to us why we picked the DAO structure. But what we learned is other organizational structures can also have this community governance component. So it might not necessarily be a DAO. It can be a collective, it can be a cooperative, and they can also implement these technologies as well too. The big thing is the community governance part in all this, and governance, I think, is big.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes down to understanding what the needs of the community are. I mean, and I think in the Pacific, there are very specific needs that we have, whether it's, we have a number of Pacific people, doing, remittances or, working somewhere else, giving money back to their families. And so seeing how blockchain can help with that. We have, in Vanuatu, they were using it to they were using blockchain to, after cyclones, getting away to, funneling NGO money to help different islands and whatnot. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why blockchain can benefit communities, and I think it's just understanding what that community needs. I think even just looking, at what we're doing up here, whether it's, NFTs and artwork and climate change awareness, or, with IndigiDAOs and financial cooperatives, or with Pasifika Web3 and working with, Indigenous communities, it kind of all comes down to what does your community need, and I think that's always a good place to start when it comes to blockchain, because it can, be extractive. There is, good and bad to everything, so.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it has to be community-driven in a whole other sense. Outside of the Pacific, for Tonga, our national GDP is around about 500 million USD, and 35 to 45%, 35 to 50% of that is remittances from our diaspora communities. Combined, the whole Pacific is around about 10 billion, and 10% of that is on remittances. So you can see the giving back of how we take care of our own and they take care of us in a whole cycle, in a whole ecosystem. And what we try to pursue with Pacific Web Free Tech Hub is to provide a platform whereby we go back to the basics of economics. Even though the barter systems had its failure because of the double coincidence of wants, but now we have the technology and the platform in place that can enable us to barter in a peer-to-peer, like how we always have been for generations. And like I mentioned earlier, but we need the political will to push the envelope further. And that's the reasoning why I'm postponing my stand on running for parliament in Tonga from 2025 to 2028, so I can build something substantial, so that when I stand there to try and push this envelope and to convince the fellow parliamentarians about what we're trying to push here, I have something to show for it. That's important. Thank you.
And can I ask all too? Yeah, what's also amazing what Edwin does, he does a lot of education in his community around the technology, which is big too. And I think what's important, we brought Edwin, is like the willingness of the community. For a vision, the community has to commit to that vision. There has to be a willingness there. So even to adopt these technologies and embrace it, again, what is the underlying value, and there has to be some rigor to that to even have these conversations. Community building is hard, but you need educators, you need leaders such as, and even Alana. Alana has helped me a lot too on creating like these systems and exploring blockchain. But what it comes down to is this is like reciprocity that we had. This is all based off of aloha. So it's a lot of values before we can even get to these technologies or even start talking about adoption of this. It takes leadership, it takes that commitment from the community to the vision, which is really big. That willingness, I think that's huge. That rigor that the community does. Because if you're going to implement blockchain, there has to be an awareness and education, but it really comes down to community engagement, community development.
So we have about 15 minutes left, and I really wanted to, thanks so much, I can see, have you guys be able to share what you're going to be working on in the future. And also, is there something the audience can take part of today, or do you see a call to action? But I'm really interested if you could each speak for about 5 minutes what you're working on and messages you would like to share.
Okay, I can start. So IndigiDAO, again, we've been around for like a year and a half. We had some seed funding from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to do exploration around blockchain to start economic cooperatives. That's why we focused on Indigenous entrepreneurs. I think a big thing, again, why we started off as a Web3 blockchain project, but what it came down to was really, again, understanding the philosophy and engaging communities and seeing what the willingness is to adopt this technology. So for us in the next year, we've kind of sunset that grant, and now we're looking on more of an implementation building grant. We started off on DAO House, so we do have, Aaron's here, MetaMask. We all have MetaMask wallets, which was big. That was huge for our community. But now we're off-chain, so a big thing for us is exploring our tech stack. So we're kind of like protocol agnostic, so we've engaged multiple different, blockchain companies, protocols. We're looking at, off-chain solutions. We've prototyped DAO simulators with, AppSheet, so no-code, low-code solutions to understand how governance works, quantum mechanics and what that looks like. And a big thing, again, for us is this is all part of the willingness of the community to even understand if this technology is appropriate. I think a big thing with IndigiDAO, again, embracing kind of like our philosophy, our first one, the Dao De Jing, and then looking to the mountain and vision question is, how do you assess technology for a community? There has to be a philosophy around that and what's appropriate. So we've been through, that's been like a whole year now. Now I think we're ready, like, okay, yeah, let's actually implement something. So that's where we're going to be looking at. We've started to, as a DAO for entrepreneurs, we're starting to look at framing ourselves as a different financial facility as well too. So what does it look like as a bioregional venture studio? A lot of our entrepreneurs are based in the Southwest. We're reaching out to some entrepreneurs out there in Hawaii and the Pacific Northwest too. So what does that look like as a bioregion to have different ventures represented as well too, and using blockchain for resource acquisition. So new financial facilities, I think we're going to be exploring that as well too. And then you start talking about like refi, regenerative finance. Where does that come in? A lot of like the Gitcoin world, that's where a lot of that happens as well too. We've also started a fund on a platform called Artisan. So Artisan is a Web3 based platform for creators. Most of our entrepreneurs are artists, technologists, they're also farmers. They're, in their community, they're tribal leaders, some of them. But that platform has enabled us to, again, be, like blockchain curious and like test it out. It's a great platform, so I encourage everyone to check out Artisan if you have your own projects, and if you want to test out blockchain technology, it's a great way to explore that. So we're ready to dive deeper into blockchain. We want to adopt some protocols. We want to use our wallets more. We want our ledger to represent all our votes, and I think we're ready. And then on the research side, a lot of the research we do around blockchain, we're just going to keep telling stories. So expect more fiction to come out. What does that look like in real life? How do these technologies be represented centuries ahead right now?
Wow, okay. I'm finishing a PhD. I think that's most of my time as of right now. And I'm at Manoa in the geography department, but kind of looking at geography more and like this idea of TA involved, of time and space and cyberspace. And my research focuses on digital cultural preservation in kind of more in the US Pacific, in areas like Guam, Marshall Islands, CNMI. And I've been primarily kind of still working with some of the communities that I've been with in the last 6 or 7 years out in the Pacific, trying to either help migrate over to blockchain or just sort of continuing with the Mukutu content management system and helping develop sites around that. So that's kind of been most of what I've been doing. I think on the other side of things, I work at Waimea Valley in research and cultural and education training. And so we've been looking at how to implement AI into some of our cultural trainings and cultural videos. And so that's kind of been an interesting sort of segue going from more of the blockchain mindset and into AI. And it was great seeing your video up there. It kind of reminded me that everything is connected. And I think still sort of working with different, primarily museums and cultural centers when it comes to smart contracts. And so still kind of learning how to do some of that as well. And at the same time, working at the Center for Oral History and doing different interviews with cultural practitioners or kupuna. And I think that's kind of been more what I've been looking at. And our director for Center for Oral History is here today too, if you have any questions, if you'd like to talk with her. I think I'm still very much within this blockchain world. It's just I've been more on the research side and trying to finish up this PhD, hopefully in the next semester or two. So I'd say that's kind of more, where I've been focused. And then, working with Richard on his Kia'i stewardship flow, which has been really awesome. We can talk more about that. But yeah, that's kind of been most of my research lately.
Oh, thank you. It's a great honor to be here and to learn from all of you. I'm an engineer by trade, and I love to build things, and I run into a lot of resistance to change, but that's what drives my innovative spirit. In a whole lot of sense, in this world and age, and especially in this technology platform, there's a lot of hype going on, and we need to separate that from what's important in the real use cases that's applicable for our own local context. And for me, context is always important because there's no one size fits all here, but what's relative. What's relative is what's in the commonalities that we have as Pacific Islanders, which brings me down to a whole community-driven, more like endorsement and what I'm here and what I've learned. And I'm quite overjoyed by the fact that Hawaii is pushing a bill for crypto assets and virtual assets, which is more like something that we can learn from our side of the Pacific. As a matter of fact, just last week, on the 5th, the National Reserve Bank of Fiji has done a press release banning virtual assets and crypto and digital assets. So that's as far as we've gone on our side. And in that domain, Fiji is quite instrumental in how reserve banks do their work in our side of the Pacific. So I wouldn't be surprised if sooner or later we'll see other Pacific islands imposing the same ban on virtual assets and similar to the National Reserve Bank of Fiji. So being here has given me an opportunity to push that envelope by let's try to see it from another perspective for another fellow Pacific island as Hawaii. Thank you.
What's one example of a blockchain economic project that you've seen or imagined that truly aligns with Indigenous values, besides the work you're doing here?
I think you're looking at a couple of them right here. I think and in this room and, on this panel, all of us have, like I said, whether there's NFTs or DAOs or, the work you've been doing in Tonga or smart contracts. I think we're all trying to really prioritize cultural protocols and prioritize Indigenous communities. And so, I'd like to think, we're examples of that. As well as a lot of the other presenters that we've, heard today. I don't know if I have a specific one.
Probably, it always goes back to New Zealand and what they're doing in Aotearoa around their digital sovereignty as well too. I think data trust will be big, and I always see the Maori and in New Zealand, I think they're the leaders in that too. New Zealand, definitely.
Oh, thank you. For me, it's participatory governance. I wrote a white paper. It's more like a decentralized governance model for Tonga, which more or less its core is all participatory governance. And I think if you're in this space, you're all into decentralization. I don't want to go into the technical stuff, but that's pretty much how I see. And also on the infrastructure side, I'm building solutions on decentralized physical infrastructure, whereby we move away from centralized expensive tech stack to more or less microgrids and ecosystems that are pretty much community driven in a whole lot of sense, bring everybody together in the melting pot of how we see ourselves as being caretakers, not in a sense, but also paying it forward for future generations. Thank you.
Does anyone have any final words to share?
I think just being in space and being in community with each other, that's the most important thing. There's a lot of important elements in the ecosystem over here. I think Hawaii's doing a great job. Ellen, thank you for putting this all together. Just everyone just keep showing up, being in community, and we build together.
Yeah, I mean, I think also one of the big things we're talking about with blockchain, right, is origins and community. And, you know, I think it's also, whether it was intentional or not, you know, I think thinking about where we actually are situated right now, I think is really important. And so, you know, we're in the Moku, the Kona Moku, which is the district of Kona here on Oahu. You know, we're within the Waikiki Ahu Pua'a. And then within that, we're in the Waikahalulu Ili, which is, Ili is a kind of a smaller area within Ahu Pua'a. And this area was, you know, I think within our conversation, we're kind of talking about this intersection of Indigenous and technology and sort of this old, new. And if you look at some of the old maps of this area, this was known as a loku site, which is a site which was a gathering place. And right next to us, so right up here about 2 blocks, was one of King Kamehameha's pauhi, one of his sweet potato fields that he used specifically for foreign ships, that he would sell to the foreign ships. And so you have kind of this sort of dichotomy going on. And then here at the Loku site, it was a place for Hawaiian oli and Hawaiian hula and chanting. And one of the interesting kind of things that I was reading about this area was, so the name Waikahalulu can be translated a couple different ways, but you know, one of them is just this kind of roaring, this water. So you know, it could be that back in the day you could hear the ocean from here, which not so much the case anymore, right? But also this is where Laka, our goddess of hula, had one of her schools, which is why this was a gathering place for hula, for chanting. And so, you know, just sort of thinking about where we are and, you know, what this place was for, and that it was a gathering place, and how right next door we had, you know, this huge field of yams, and then next to us was a rifle range, and next to that was a spear throwing field, and this was all in like the early 1800s. And so, you know, I think it's interesting to kind of look at sort of what this, you know, what this place is, and, you know, like I said, whether it was intentional or not, this really was a crossroads. And so this area has, you know, I think really speaks to some of the work that we're even doing today and kind of in a different realm. And so, yeah, I just sort of wanted to share that about, you know, about this space and about this place, because I think when we're talking about Indigenous protocols and, you know, and cultural communities and whatnot, like Aina and land and water and Vai and Moana all really come into play. And so, yeah, I think that's maybe one thing to add about this area.
Ayo.
Thank you very much. Like, a big mahalo going out to Ellen, the organizers, and on the sponsors. Brittany, a big mahalo to you as well, and to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think these examples are perfect examples how blockchain can preserve memory, identity, self-determination, our past, and with preserving this, we can move forward in ways that are innovative and just build for the future. So thank you all so much, and thank you all for being here.
Maho.